Welcome to Solo, the single person's guide to a remarkable life. Your host, a behavioral scientist and bachelor, talks to leading experts and successful singles about living solo and living well. Travel more, make things, sleep in when you want to. Here's the playbook for the person who is unapologetically unattached. Now, please welcome Dr. Peter McGraw.
Welcome back. This episode examines the first season of Indian Matchmaking, a popular yet controversial new Netflix show. It's not necessary to have watched it, but I bet the conversation with my guest, Rupali Malhotra, an Indian-American friend who has experience using a matchmaker, will make you want to check out the show. It's a fun conversation, and I won't ruin it here, but I'll make the case for why the show is worthy of discussion besides the obvious voyeuristic elements of reality TV. That is, that living solo and living well is barely touched on as a viable option, even though some of the show's characters seem better suited for solo living. Or at the very least, they are highly ambivalent about partnering up. Spoiler alert, one of the characters decides that solo is the way to go. If you stick around to the bonus material, Rupali and I talk about one of the topics that makes the show controversial to some, and that is the colorism on display in the matchmaking clients' preferences. That is, their desire for light-skinned matches. We also talk about the rampant heightism in the show, but no one seems to be taking issue with that. By now you know the usual announcements. Solo has a message board on the Solo page at petermcgraw.org, and you can sign up for the Solo community and learn about the forthcoming live Zoom community call. And also, Rapture Masks continues to sponsor us. That's Rapture with a W, like wrap it up. Use promo code RAPTURESOLO to get the Solo discount. I hope you enjoy the episode. Let's get started. Welcome to Solo, the single person's guide to a remarkable life. I'm Peter McGraw. Today's guest is Rupali Malhotra.
Hello.
Rupali is an armchair psychologist, novice world traveler, and nerd. She wrote Academia Enthusiast. Nerd is my change.
I like nerd.
Raised by Hindu immigrant parents in rural Christian America, she's fascinated with culture, values, and identity, making her an ideal podcast guest or good company over a glass of wine or whiskey. During business hours, she works in education and law. In other words, she's a lawyer at a university. Welcome, Rupali.
Thank you for having me.
So we're here to talk about the popular Netflix show, Indian Matchmaking.
Yes, the story of my 20s and 30s.
Oh my God, well, that's why you're here. And the show it's getting mixed reviews.
Really? People love it, people hate it?
Yes, actually, I learned a new term while researching this.
Hate watch?
Yes.
Hate watch, yes.
People are hate watching Indian matchmaking. But before we get into that, why then are you an ideal guest for this particular show?
Well, you know, when I watched the show, I felt as though any or all of these people could have been my girlfriends or people in my community or people I went to college with or people who I, in fact, was set up on a blind date with. So I understand this on an intuitive, personal, cultural level. So nothing on the show really surprised me. It was all very familiar, and I can't wait to talk about it.
That's great. So this is an 8-part series. Season 1 is 8 episodes. Each of us watched the full season.
Yes.
We have not talked about it
with anybody. And I've been asked many times. This is special.
Yes, you've been holding off.
I've been holding off discussing it.
You're going to be a geyser of opinions. Now, for the audience, you don't have to have watched the episodes in order to enjoy this conversation, I suspect. But this conversation may make you want to watch it.
I agree.
I would say.
I agree.
Okay, so why mixed? Why are people hate watching? What is the tension between the annoyance and the accuracy of this show?
I think anybody who's gone on a date and sat across from one of these people is just, and especially if you've done it multiple times, it is so annoying because you know these people. You have sat across in a coffee shop. You've sat across a table from these people. You've gone to a bar. And you've met these people and you've seen these personality quirks and traits. And if you've done this for a long time, it's so annoying because you know that guy. You know that girl. I'm sure if you ask a guy, he might say, oh yeah, RuPaul was that girl, right? So I think there's a bit of that element for the hate. For me, it was just I know exactly how this works, the frustrations, but also for me, I had fun with it. So for me, I could watch this and it was fun for me to identify with the struggles that they're going through. But I also really want to tell them it's so much fun. Like if you step back and allow yourself to enjoy it, it's so much fun. I think that the problem with the Indian dating is they put so much pressure on you. It's not about fun. It's about getting married and hitting this target and hitting this milestone in life. It's a bit unfair because otherwise dating can be great. It's a great way to meet new people. You uncover more about yourself through the process. You learn about the quirks and interesting traits of other people. But that's not what Indian matchmaking is about. It's not supposed to be fun.
It's not supposed to be fun.
It's not supposed to be fun.
It does seem like a lot of work. So there seems to be, hearing what you say is there's two elements in your opinion. There's the Indian part of it.
Yes.
And then there's the dating part of it. And the dating part of it is, I think, easy to identify with as anyone who's ever dated. And the Indian part of it may or may not be easy to identify with.
Yeah. Although I think that, I have friends from all over the spectrum in terms of culture and religion. And, one of my best friends is a conservative Christian. And so she would tell you that her dating experience is quite the same. You don't meet for kicks and you don't meet, especially after a certain age, you don't meet because you're bored or you want to pass the time. You meet because you are looking for a potential life partner. And so it can be a very heavy and loaded sort of interaction. So I think that could also be relatable across cultures, although this is specifically geared towards the Indian matchmaking experience.
So let's talk about the premise of the show for the listener who may not have seen it.
Sure.
Okay, so in India, there are two types of marriages. There are marriages and there are love marriages.
Love marriages, yes.
And so a marriage is an arranged marriage.
By default in
default.
India, yes.
That's the norm.
That is the norm.
And what is an arranged marriage exactly?
So an arranged marriage could encompass a lot of different processes, but ultimately your family is selecting someone who they think would be a good fit for the entire family. And both sides do this together, but it's not an individual process. You aren't going out there and selecting somebody who's a good fit for you. Your family is selecting somebody who is going to be a good fit for the family. So it's just a different mindset altogether. It's much more of a collective experience as opposed to an individual experience. And if you look at the way the Indian people traditionally live, which is in extended families, then that makes a lot of sense, right? It's not just about finding somebody who makes you happy, but if you also have to worry about your older brother and your mom and your dad and your grandparents or your great-grandparents, if you have 10 people living in one house, then it does sort of make sense that you want somebody who's going to fit in with the group, not just somebody who you find to be amazing. So that's the arranged marriage. And, it can be done in a lot of different ways. Matchmakers are obviously what this show is all about. There are a lot of these all over India. There are a lot of them even in the United States. And they cater to this population like me, so first or second generation South Asian Americans who are trying to mix a little bit of the old with a little bit of the new. But they also do it through matrimonials in newspapers, which is also a very common way. So in the back section of the newspapers where we might find classified ads, they have a matrimonials section.
Really?
And that's very common for your parents to post, or your grandparents maybe, depending on who the elder or the patriarch or matriarch of the family is, to post something saying, I have a daughter or a son of this age, with this type of education, living in this place, and this is what they're seeking in the partner. So, it's what would be very strange, obviously, to consider in the United States. That's very normal there. And there's a lot of people who arrange that way. Even on the show, when they interviewed in the very beginning, all of the older couples,
yes.
A couple of them mentioned that that's how they had been arranged, or that's how they had been introduced through these ads. That's a very normal thing.
It's common. Yeah. So I would say for listeners who are not familiar with this can seem rather peculiar.
Right.
But what I want to also remind people is with non-Indian cultures, this also used to be the norm. You know, so in England, there were basically arranged marriages and so on. So this is something that is a very common part of cultures more generally.
Sure.
And the rise of the love marriage, so to speak, the one that we know typically in the United States, for example,
right,
or in England, modern day England and so on, is a fairly new phenomenon.
True.
And it's fraught also in different ways.
Not every side will tell you that their approach is better, and they'll list off a number of reasons as to why.
Yes. So, I mean, it may sound peculiar to people. Why are you, for a podcast for single people, for people with a solo orientation, talking about arranged marriages? But I think that this is the reason why I've chose this as a topic is going to come up. But I'm going to give a little quick preview, and that is the goal focus that you've already mentioned.
Sure.
Of this is the only acceptable positive outcome of this, that this is not a trying out thing. This is just assumed that marriage is the solution.
Right.
And I've been sort of tussling with the idea of marriage in previous podcast episodes. And so one of them, is actually about people who should never have married. And my guest pointed out how marriage, I guess historically, and then even in sort of present day India, at least aspects of it, is this very utilitarian thing.
It is.
It serves a purpose.
Yeah, it's not an option to remain single. Our culture loves marriages. We love weddings.
Big weddings.
Big weddings. I mean, this pandemic has caused all kinds of cultural issues in India because you can't have the big wedding anymore. But yeah, we're sort of famous for that. We love it. And from the day that children are born, people start preparing for the wedding that will have to happen, not may happen. It absolutely will happen. So staying single is not an option. And I don't necessarily know that's the healthiest approach. But it's a rite of passage. It's something that you do. It's deemed, if you stay single for too long, it's almost seen as a bad thing. Like, what's wrong with that family? You know, it's not the norm.
Yes. So I have some themes that I've noted from the show.
Yes.
And one of them is this notion about how Indian families, at least the Indian families in the show, care about respectability.
Yes. Yes.
So,
you know, I liken it. I love the show Downton Abbey. And the reason I love it is there are so many values and approaches that are incredibly similar to this, which is you have to marry somebody who is respectable. And by respectable, I mean, you know, a respected family, well-educated, professional, a certain financial status, you know, demonstrates good conservative morals and values, you know, believes in having many children and raising them in that way. But this is not unique to India, right?
No.
If you think about this is universal, right? So I think that, the respectability coming from a good family, that's very important. And you can see that in the show. That's important everywhere.
And I think that those pressures show up in love marriages also.
Of course.
Yes. Yeah. So let's get into the show a little bit because I want to talk about the players.
Okay.
And then we can get into the topics, and I'm eager to hear your opinions because I know you have them. So the matchmaker,
yes,
Seema is her name.
Yes.
So she's mid-50s.
Probably.
Yeah. I did the math. She's 56.
Got it. Okay.
She lives in India.
Yes.
But she is a global matchmaker. So she will venture, especially into the United States.
Yes.
To do this. She seems rather good at what she does, I think.
I think that's good always depends on who's doing the assessing.
Maybe you should do the assessing.
So if you subscribe to if you buy into this, right? If your values are the same as what it seems like her portfolio is, right? Certain things are very important in terms of when she does the matchmaking. And you can see it on the show, right? She's lining up people by their profession and their height and attractiveness level. She claims that she's doing matchmaking based on personality, but how well do you really get to know somebody when you meet them for the first 5 minutes? You know what I mean? I don't know how well she truly knows these people. I think as good as some outsiders are at assessing your personality, then I don't know. I think there's a lot more to know about a person than your first 5 minute snap judgment. But regardless, if you subscribe to her methods, then yes, you're going to say that she's good at what she does. I think I watched
She's good enough to get a show.
She's good enough to get a show, right? I watched it and I kind of found myself smacking, my forehead quite a bit because, again, to me, I've never met somebody who's been married for 25 years and they said, the most important thing about him was his height. Oh my God. That's what's kept us together for 25 years. That's not it.
Okay. We are going to return. I'm going to hold off on the height stuff.
Okay.
Because we're going to return for the bonus material and we're going to talk about colorism.
Yes.
And heightism.
Yes.
Which is something that comes up
a lot. And
it actually, some of the critiques and some of the hate watching
because of that.
Is because of the colorism.
Yeah.
Not the heightism.
Yeah.
No one seems to care about the heightism.
Maybe that's just because it's more universal.
Yes. So we'll return to that. So let's talk through Seema's process before we introduce the characters.
Sure.
And so Seema, there's a few things that I not like, but I noticed about this that I thought was very interesting. And then I want to find out about your matchmaking experience and how it matches or not. So one thing that she does, so she obviously meets the prospective clients and she meets their family.
Yes.
Their parents.
Because it's a group decision.
Yes.
It's a group decision.
And she gets the preferences. And as you were sort of talking about, a lot of some of the preferences are personality based. Like I want someone who's extroverted, who has a sense of adventure, who's curious and so on. But then some of them is successful, they do this or they don't do that.
This kind of income, right?
Yes, that kind of thing. And then she will for that client present 1, 2, or 3 possible matches.
Right.
And they use this term biodata, which is really, it's
a resume.
Yes.
It's your personal, it's if you go to match.com, this is what you're filling out.
Yes.
It's your one sheet. Yeah. This is
There's a single picture.
There's a single picture.
Not even a full body picture.
Nope. No, that doesn't really matter. Right? It doesn't matter what the rest of you looks like. You just need a headshot, right? That's
right.
The only thing that matters.
And then she does something. Oh, the other thing is she visits the home of the client.
Yes.
And she gets a tour of the home.
That's true. I think that's a way of also sussing out, what kind of lifestyle do you live? How much money do you actually have? Or even if you have a lot of money, do you live humbly? Do you have a lot of material? Do you have name brands everywhere? Is your house, adorned with, gold tchotchkes? And, are you serving wine out of fine crystal? Or, are you having tea in simple cups and saucers? And, it is a way of kind of getting to know somebody. And we all know that. We meet people and then when we go to their homes for the first time, we meet their families for the first time, we have this whole different insight as to who they are and how they live. So it is a useful tool. I think that's probably a good part of her process is that she's not just vetting people on paper. I think that it adds a whole different layer of understanding when you actually go to somebody's house. I
agree. And she does that tour before she presents potential matches.
Right.
So she's assessing.
Right.
So there's actually research on this kind of thing. So there's a professor of psychology at the University of Texas named Sam Gosling, and he does research on the places that we live and work.
Sure.
And how they're sort of rich data sets.
Right.
About what people are like.
Yeah.
And he has a book called Snoop. I'll put a link in the exhibits. One of the things that's really fascinating. So he does, for example, not experiment, but studies where people look at people's bedrooms and their offices.
Interesting.
And that this is a treasure trove of data about the person.
That makes perfect sense.
And one of the things that they find, a lot of psychology points out what people are bad at. But Sam's
just like any good Indian auntie or uncle, they're very quick to point out where you lack.
Where you're lacking.
Where you're lacking.
What he finds in this research is that observers, so not even like Seema, you would argue, is a professional assessor.
Sure.
But even regular everyday people are pretty good at picking up sort of personality cues.
Sure. Okay.
And so on about like, the most obvious one is conscientiousness, you know, and so tidiness versus messiness and so on.
Yeah.
But one of the examples that Sam talks about that I think is really, really, really interesting is if you go into someone's office and they have photos of their family, let's say, which direction are the photos facing?
Oh, interesting. Are they facing you or are they facing everybody else?
That's exactly right. So if they're facing you, it's this sort of, this person uses those photos as a little brief,
it's a reminder,
positive break in their
why
day.
They're there. Why am I suffering through this day? Yes. Why am I dealing with these angry phone calls? That's true. That's true. That's why I keep my photo.
Yeah. Versus facing out, which is like, look at my world. Look at my happy family. Look at all the, you know,
makes perfect
it's setting
sense.
an identity.
You know what I always found really interesting is the people who have every single accolade and award they've ever been given in life plastered on a wall. I think that's always to me, the number of awards that you have framed on your wall, is a sign of how much padding your ego needs, right? I remember dating a guy once who literally had perfect attendance awards from
well, at least you know that he's going to show up on time.
I suppose. But if they're framed and on your wall and you're a 35-year-old person, I have to wonder about your level of security.
Yes. So you did not marry him?
I did not. And actually, what's interesting, I don't have a single thing framed on my wall. I have nothing. I have 3 degrees. I have 2 law licenses. I have 0 things framed on my wall. So I suppose that's an interesting psychological insight for me.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, so my thing about it is if someone has lots of that stuff on their wall, they probably do well with someone who has lots of stuff like that on their wall.
Exactly. Yeah.
So let's talk about your matchmaking experience before we get to these characters.
Sure.
Because it is an interesting group of characters.
Sure.
Some of them are very wealthy.
Sure.
And some of them are I wouldn't say no one's low income, but of more modest.
Yeah, I think you have to be able to pay the matchmaker.
Indeed.
So there's certainly there's certainly a filter there, at least on the show, of who she has.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. Especially if she's big time,
right,
so to speak.
Right.
Okay, so what led you to a matchmaking service?
So I had used...
And was it an Indian matchmaking?
Yeah, so she was Indian American. So I... throughout my 20s and 30s, had been using South Asian American geared dating websites. So there are a few of those.
What would be one?
They're Indian versions of basically a Match.com.
Okay.
And so they have one called Shaadi.com, which
I've heard of this.
Right. So that's a very big one. And lots of cultures have these, right? There's Black People Meet, there's JDate, right? So there are lots of dating
Farmers
sites.
Only.
FarmersOnly.com. So there are lots of dating sites that cater to specific populations, right? So, this is something that everybody, especially in this generation, does. I mean, meeting people in person is almost considered a bit unusual now, right? So
it's very hard to operate in real life these days.
It is.
It's counter-normative in some ways. Like people will freak out if you try to chat them up.
It's true. And I think, part of the reason why the sites are so popular is you can do it from your pajamas, sitting, sitting in the comfort of your own home. There's a lot that you might know about a person, depending on whether they're being truthful or not in their profile, before you ever have to actually meet them face to face. But also because, if you're South Asian and you are not living in India, your prospects the people in that pool is just smaller geographically. Yes. So I was sitting in a small town in central Illinois, in a college town where the number of South Asian Americans wasn't that great, actually. So, it wasn't Chicago, it wasn't New York, it wasn't LA, it wasn't Miami or SF. So, the sites worked well because they allowed me to tap into pools that were just bigger than what I had around, in my immediate 10-mile radius. So, it was, the path for a few years. And then I tried the matchmaker only because she, as a lot of matchmakers do, scour the same sites, right? They scour these sites to find people to add to their portfolio.
They're like, this woman has got it going on.
She would be great for my clients,
Yes.
who are looking for somebody who meets, right? So, and this person works probably the same as Miss Seema here. She probably works with people from all over the country, all over the world, and she builds her portfolio, her digital Rolodex, so to speak, so that she can set up potential people in her network. So
you got approached. You got a cold call, basically.
Yeah, and this is how people get clients, right? It's not different from any other sort of field.
Yeah, you're in the funnel, Rupali.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, you're in the sales funnel.
She had good marketing techniques and she was advertising and, reached out by email. So I conducted an interview, did a phone call, never actually met her in person.
Okay.
That was just, I think, because of logistics. I don't actually know where this particular matchmaker lives. And went on a few dates with some of her clients. They were okay. I think that, again, there's only so much that you can really know about a person. You can set up people based on their profiles and also what information they are choosing to share with you. But ultimately, chemistry it's kind of hard to predict.
It is indeed, yeah. So I'll tell you, I have some matchmaking experience.
Oh, yeah? What'd you do? Who'd you set up?
No, being approached.
Ah, okay.
So, there's another place that one gets approached by matchmakers. Do you want to guess where it is?
Weddings?
LinkedIn.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, sure. That makes sense. Actually, you're getting a cohort of people who are educated and of a certain... Oh, that makes perfect sense to me.
I've had 2 or 3 matchmakers...
That makes sense to me.
Connect with me on LinkedIn and then send me a note telling me, what a great,
what a great catch you are.
Yes,
what a great catch you are.
And so I usually say something like, oh, thanks so much. I'm incredibly flattered by that. However, I'm probably not the ideal client.
No, you should go.
And then I say, I host a podcast called Solo, the Single Person's Guide to a Remarkable Life. And they usually...
So wait, do they want you to they want you to retain their services, not that they want to set you up with some of their clients?
I don't know. My sense...
You need to delve into this.
My sense is they want to set me up.
This is a gold mine for you.
Yeah. My sense is they want to set me up. I think that I think when it comes to matchmaking, women are more likely to be I could be wrong about that. No, maybe not.
No, there's also a great show on Bravo. I don't know if it still airs anymore, called Millionaire Matchmaker.
That's true.
And her clients, I think, were all men.
That's right. Yeah, I shouldn't say that.
I don't know either.
That's right.
I don't know either. But I do encourage you to go through it. If nothing else, you have great podcast material.
Rupali, thank you for saying that. Actually, I'm going to make a commitment to the following. The next matchmaker on LinkedIn who reaches out to me, I'm going to say yes. Just to see what it's like.
Yes, you should.
That's a great idea. Thank you so much for... Here's why I say no. I have such a deep need for honesty, and I don't want to waste anyone's time. But there might
You would be great at Indian dating then. This is fantastic. Because you're just in it. You want efficiency. You're dating with intention, with purpose.
So maybe if I can figure out a way to do it ethically and get some podcast material and approach it with a sort of open mind and open heart, I'll tell you what, I'll do it. So
you should absolutely do it.
Okay. So you did it. Didn't quite work out. I think the issue is the tension to me between a matchmaker and the apps, and they're not mutually exclusive. Obviously, someone can employ a matchmaker and still work the apps, is the matchmaking seems to be good at getting motivated people.
Yes.
So if you're in that world, you are motivated to try to partner up.
Sure.
And then you also have the advantage of someone's, so this family thing, I think one of the advantages of family is they often understand you better than you understand yourself.
Depends.
In some circumstances.
In some circumstances, right.
And then obviously there is, and this is a theme in the show, is the pressure that gets put on this. But it's a small number. It's a small numbers game. So Seema will present at most 3 options. And I thought one of the fascinating things that she does, you pick one.
Right.
You don't go on 3 of the dates. You pick the one that you think is most appealing. You go on that date, and then you decide, and your date decides yes or no. If it's 2 yeses, you proceed. If one of them gets a no, you move to the next one.
Sure.
Now, this is really fascinating.
Choice.
So there is something in economics called the secretary problem. So it goes by other names. It goes by the marriage problem, the fussy suitor problem, the best choice problem.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Okay. So for the listener, it's a theoretical exercise that nerdy economists do to figure out what is the optimal stopping rule when you are in this kind of scenario where you're shopping, so to speak. You're looking to hire a secretary. You're looking for a life partner, whatever.
Right.
Where you go sequentially and you decide yes or no. If it's yes, if it's yes, you stop looking. If it's no, you continue looking.
Right. Right.
And the problem is that, you may, if you say no, actually have passed on the best candidate for you.
How many options do you have?
Yes.
Yeah, isn't there, I thought I remember hearing, again, armchair psychology, something like the magic number was 7. If you are presented with 7 options, you will make a good choice, but anything after 7, your choice, the quality of your choice decreases because your brain is just overwhelmed with the number of options that you have been given.
Okay. I would give you, if this was a final exam, I would give you like a B on that answer.
I'll take a B. It's not the Asian American standard of an A+, but it's fine. It's enough to get me by.
So I'm going to nerd out for a moment here.
Yes.
So the idea is you have to know the population, the number in the population.
Okay.
Or in the sample at least.
Okay.
So step 1, I'm pulling this from an article from Slate because they say it more eloquently than I could. I'll put it in the exhibits. You estimate the number of people you could date in your life. That's N.
Okay.
Okay. You calculate the square root of that number.
Okay.
Okay. You date and reject the first square root of N. And you take the best of those people you've seen. And that's your benchmark. Okay.
I love it.
And then you keep dating and you settle down for the first person that exceeds that benchmark. Now, what's fascinating about this process is it's not guaranteed to get you the best person, but it's designed to get you a very good person. And so the idea essentially is if you choose the first person that you meet in the population, you're probably not picking a person who's very, very good for you. If you wait to the last person, you're probably not going to get the person who's very good for you. Right? So what ends up happening is this saying about don't let perfection be the enemy of good. Sure. So the secretary problem, this stopping rule is designed to get you someone who's good to very good and recognizes that you need experience getting an idea of the population.
What I find so interesting about this already, and this is why I'm an academia enthusiast. Wait, good for you right now.
Yes.
And that's the other thing that I'm sure your podcast talks a lot about is how you evolve as a human being. What was it? 15 and 25 and 35. I mean, they're different. There are some common themes there, but people evolve and they grow. And so while I love that data, but I also think, it may not, the person who you might select, who may be the result of that mathematical equation might work for you really well at the age of 28. And then at 42, suddenly it's a different calculation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I'm not prescribing. This is not prescription. This is description of a way to think about the dating. And it seems like the match, this idea of the sequential thing is, one is it's designed to put some pressure, I think. You're like, you've got 3 and let's see how this goes. But these are my 3 best. And so,
I mean, I think there's something to be said for focus. If you're going on one date knowing that you have 2 more coming up, the amount of tension or energy you might put into it, or I think you would approach it differently. If
Yes.
you knew that this was the one and only date, you would approach it differently. I think just in terms of your own personal mindset. I suppose,
Yes.
how you might prepare for it, how you might talk to that person, how you might get feedback. I think.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just going to say this right out the gates because I found the show to be quite entertaining, a little bit, it was a little voyeuristic for me.
Sure.
And, I've been to India, and so it was fun to see
I didn't know
Mumbai
that.
and,
Yeah, that's great.
and to kind of revisit my experiences there. And then the other thing was, but the one thing that I found, what I didn't like is the assumption that this is the path. And the idea, and I'm going to go through the characters in a moment, but what became clear to me is for some of the characters, this is the right path.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they wanted to get married.
They really want this.
Right.
And others seemed at best ambivalent.
Yes, that's true.
About it.
That's true.
And I felt for some of those because
it
again,
was clearly pressure.
The pressure is coming from all sides.
Cultural pressure is enormous.
And it assumes that 100% of people should do this and will benefit from doing this. And I know that is an impossibility. There's nothing in the world when it comes to choices that 100% of people.
That is correct. I think those characters, I think resonate across the board because I think anybody feels that way. I mean, even young people who I know at the, college students who I work with from across the board, no matter their cultural background. I mean, social media doesn't help, but they will say things like, "Oh my God, everybody everybody I know in life is getting married. So many people are having babies." And that isn't just the South Asian American population.
Oh my goodness.
We all feel that way. It's just incredibly pronounced, I feel, in our culture.
I think there is this. So this is the worst place for this is Instagram.
Yeah. Any social media. Yes. It's awful.
But the Instagram stuff, especially because, Instagram still has this sort of candy feel to it. It's very like, it's a very pleasant, visual, pleasing, happy place.
Sure.
I think not completely, but more so than other forms of social media.
Right.
It's so fascinating. So if you're a proud solo, it's harder to celebrate it than if you are a proud partnered person in this, and proud parent and so on. Because think about all the milestones that you can show off on Instagram.
Of course, yeah.
The engagement videos and things are just nauseating. And then the wedding ones, and then the pregnancy ones, and the baby showers, and the gender reveals, and you know what I mean? And so it is a constant flow from the world of family.
Of course.
Birthdays and this and that I think create an imbalanced view.
Totally.
Of what it means because, you just don't, there's not as many rituals for the solos.
Right. And I guess that's fascinating.
You don't have vasectomy celebration videos on Instagram,
Yeah. And that would be a fascinating exercise, like a fascinating research project to scroll through Instagram feeds and then determine whether somebody is single or whether they're married. What stage of life are they in?
Oh my God. So easy to do. No, that's not true. For a group of people who are very public about it. For the people, you know what it is? It's the people who take their family photos.
Yeah, and place them outwards.
On their desk.
They frame every single award they've ever won on their walls. They want you to see it.
That's right. And
they want you to see it.
Sam Gosling has extended his research outside of the bedroom and the office into social media profiles in a very similar way.
Sure,
so
that makes perfect sense.
It's fitting to bring that up. Yeah, so let's talk. I'm gonna read you these characters. There's a lot of characters.
Yes.
In this, I'm going to read the clients, and what I'd like you to do. We're gonna not pay much attention to their potential matches and so on.
Yes.
Let's talk about these characters. What I want to do is I'm gonna read the characters. I'm gonna try to get their names right. So please correct as necessary.
Sure.
And then let's talk a little bit about them and let's judge them.
Yes, I
on
love
this.
that.
What,
Let's
you don't even
do
know?
it. Let's judge it.
Let's judge them along this dimension.
Hey man, they put themselves on the show. They open themselves up for judgment. So I will do as they requested me to do.
Okay, super. Well, one of the things I want you to judge them on, we will do it, is the degree that they fit this profile of this seems like a good path for them.
Oh,
in terms of their true inner interests
oh, sure,
and desires,
Sure.
as opposed to their families.
Sure.
Versus that they have perhaps a solo mentality to the in-between, which is they don't know yet. You know, they don't know yet. So the first one, I would say that she is the main character besides Seema. Seema is obviously the thread through all of it. Who do you think is like the main character?
I would go with Aparna.
Yes, you are correct.
The fellow attorney, and in Texas.
Yeah, so Aparna's 34. She's lives in Houston, and just describe Aparna. What do you think?
I would describe her as very proud, and I would also describe her as very critical. And I think that those are two very difficult personality traits to date.
She's very successful.
She's successful. She's in some ways, I identify with her very much, right? I was her age and I had gone through a lot in life. I had worked so hard for my education. I had my career figured out. So in some ways, I very much identified with her. When you those same characteristics that get you through your professional career, you sometimes apply them correctly or incorrectly to your personal life, thinking it will yield the same result. And it often doesn't, especially with attorneys, man. We are a picky bunch.
Yeah, it's interesting. So first of all, you are so much more agreeable than Aparna.
But, you might want to ask some of my exes because they may disagree with you. They may disagree with you. As a friend, for sure.
That's fair. I mean, especially if you're on a mission.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the classic thing with lawyers is they care about rules and standards.
And they pick everything apart.
And contracts.
Yeah, and, from an Indian mindset in which arranged marriages are very contractual, right? You bring X, Y, and Z to the table. I bring A, B, C to the table, and let's move forward in this particular agreed upon fashion. In some ways, it could work out really well. I don't know what kind of attorney she is. I don't know if she's transactional or a litigation-based attorney. I have been told two litigators should never be married because they would just argue each other to death.
So Aparna has some struggles.
Right.
Her sort of plot line is that she is starting to learn that she might need to compromise.
Right.
But what do you think of her along this dimension of should partner, should solo?
Yeah, and I think she seems to have a lot going for her already.
Yes.
And it isn't clear to me why she wants to get married. She says at the top of the show, like, I'm ready to have my partner. I'm ready to have somebody sharing these adventures with me. That's understandable. That makes sense. I think that's where I was too. You don't have somebody around because you need anything. You just want to share. Yes. And so that's fair. But then the approach is very...
Don't hold back, Rupali.
I mean, it's kind of interesting because if you want to celebrate things with people, she doesn't really seem like the way that she approaches all of these people is very critical and very negative. I mean, could you imagine being on the receiving end of that, even as a friend or on a date, when you say, oh, I went to such and such place, and she'll say, oh, that's a stupid place. Why'd you go there? I mean,
yeah, she has strong opinions, I would say.
Yeah.
She knows what she wants.
She'll say, that's something that I've heard a lot of negative people say. They'll say, I know what I want.
Yes.
But I think, and this is, again, armchair psychology, people are usually really bad at identifying what they want. Sometimes it does take somebody external. I think the best thing that Seema does on the show is send people to therapists.
Yes, life coaches or astrologers.
The astrologers, that's a bunch of nonsense. But therapy, yes, I think some people, all of these people, in fact, would benefit for a lot of very intensive therapy to get not that they need to be fixed. That's not it. But just to bring self-awareness.
Yes.
To recognize that, oh, these are my personality traits or characteristics, and I need to be more honest and forthcoming about them as I approach just life generally. Forget dating, but just life generally.
Okay, I'm going to make my opinion here because you have not directly answered the question.
I don't know that she is ready to be married yet.
I think Aparna, in many ways, will be a better solo than she will be a partnered.
Sure.
And she said something early on that I wrote down. She wrote, "Your partner should fit into your life." And that seems like a much more solo orientation. Also, she has this she sort of already has a partner in her
mom.
life. And it's her mom.
It's her mom. Yeah.
Her and her mom have this very close bond. They seem cut from the same cloth.
They're exactly the same.
And there's a scene where Aparna gives her mom a quilt or a tapestry or whatever of all these photos of the kids and of her and so on. You know, and I would say this, I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
No, I know people who have fantastic relationships with their family members, you know, whether that be siblings or parents or even best friends, and they are fulfilled.
Yes.
You know, any emotional struggles, they have that outlet already. Any partners through life, they have those bonds. And so it does beg the question, what do you need this other person for?
Yes.
You already have it. And so anybody you meet won't do a good of job as fulfilling those needs as the bonds you already have. So then what's the point?
It's quite impossible. Yes. So that was my opinion. So to me, I mean, Aparna is just because of her, and I actually have a lot of compassion for her. She's easy to hate and easy to make fun of, and the show kind of roasts her in a variety of subtle ways. I'm sure they
edited her to bring out all of her worst qualities.
That's probably fair too. Yes, I think that's right. Yes. But I feel, I feel that she's in a very difficult situation. I'm heartened by the fact that she seems willing to try to change and compromise and try to give this a go, even if at the end she comes to some, who knows, realization.
Sure.
This is a cliffhanger for the season 1. Second character.
Yes.
Nadia.
Yes.
Ah, you light up.
I love Nadia.
Who doesn't?
I want to set Nadia up with everybody I know.
Oh.
She just seems wonderful.
So she's an event planner in New Jersey, and she is a delight.
She is. She's so much fun to watch.
Oh my goodness.
She wants to be in love. She wants to be in a relationship.
Yeah.
She needs a partner. This is the person we're on the spectrum, solo or married. This girl needs to be married.
Put her on the partner side.
She loves it.
I would agree. She has this really satisfying life, wonderful friends, hobbies, successful business, but nonetheless, she still feels lonely.
Yeah.
And I that makes me a little sad because she has this great life and she is so unsatisfied with it. She feels like she's stuck in this liminal space until she can make this work. And, but I agree with you in terms of her orientation. It is very partnered focus. Maybe the most.
Yeah. I mean, as I think about all the people on the show, yeah, that's probably true. I think if anything, I feel a little bad for her because she's so clearly, she's one of those pure optimists, right? No matter who she meets, I imagine she could find positive attributes about that person and fall in love with them.
Yes.
And so I almost wonder that she would settle for somebody who was so not worthy of her time. Like this guy on the show who she dated for a while, who flaked on her twice.
Oh.
I felt so bad. He was awful, but she still was willing to give it a shot. She found the good attributes in this guy who I hope the entire country is firmly rooting against because he was just awful. I think that that's probably her danger. She's that great girlfriend who will just marry some guy who is so not appreciative of how fabulous she is. So I'm hoping good things for her. I hope she finds somebody who truly celebrates her for how joyful and positive she is.
Indeed. Well said. She gets stood up at some point and the guy gives
twice.
A crap
Twice.
excuse.
Yeah.
And he should have been finished after the first one.
Yes.
I have no, you don't know this. I have an ex who reminds me of Nadia.
Oh.
And I think we had a really wonderful relationship. And it's just unfortunate because I don't think I was a good match for her.
Was she optimistic all the time?
Well, she
overflowing with joy.
Yeah, she's a joyful person and a successful person. But that's not why we were a bad match. We were a good match for that reason.
Academics don't work well with the overly positive and joyful types. We're far too cynical in life.
We had a great time. It's just I never was going to be able to fully fulfill what she deep down wanted. Mm-hmm. And so I see her in Nadia and Nadia in her in that way. And I'm happy to report that she was able to accomplish a family without me helping.
It's very honest self-reflection there. I appreciate that. I appreciate that.
Okay, the next one, I may get this name wrong.
Pradhaman.
Yes, Pradhaman. So he lives in Mumbai.
Yes.
He's 30.
Yes.
Works in the family jewelry business, very affluent. Right. He's a good-looking guy. Yes. Cares about. I thought he was sort of an interesting character. He's a cook and he's very cultured. He's very artistic.
Yeah.
A little bit serious.
A little bit.
Yeah.
I think that this is a guy who's identifiable to the LA types. Somebody who is good-looking, has money, is pretty fulfilled by his professional pursuits.
Social, he has friends, he goes out a lot.
Friends. I'm sure he gets a lot of attention when he goes out. He probably enjoys that. So then again, what need do you really have to be married, right? And this is the Peter Pan syndrome in LA, where men will just continue to date. If they have those attributes, they can always find somebody to date.
Yes.
And because they think so highly of themselves, or they are quite proud of their whatever their physical attributes or financial status, there's always somebody to date when you have those attributes. So then why settle down, really? Yeah.
And I think this has come up in previous episodes. We had a dating coach on one, Dalia Karnofsky, and we talked deeply about Peter Pans.
Oh, okay.
So I don't like that term.
Okay.
Only because I don't think it's always well applied.
Oh, okay.
And what Dalia and I came to an agreement on is the guy who doesn't want to settle down, who's happy with his life and enjoys dating casually. There's nothing wrong with that guy.
That's true.
Unless he claims to not be that guy.
Yes.
And he claims to be the guy who wants to get serious and wants to settle down.
That's true.
And now he's 45 and he just can't meet the right person.
Right.
That guy is not being honest with himself and he's not being honest with his dates.
To the women he's dating either.
Exactly.
Or other men.
Or the men. Yeah, it doesn't matter. Yeah. So, but where does Pradhaman?
I think if left up to his own devices, I think this is somebody who, if he wasn't in that culture, so embedded in that culture, I think he's somebody who's probably happy being solo and dating.
Yeah, he's only 30.
And again, in South Asian culture, that's considered like well past the time where you should be married. There's another person on the show who's 25 and his mom is
we're gonna get to him
because he's not married yet. So I think that if you extracted him from the culture, he'd be fine living in New York or living in LA and just dating and having fun. I think he'd be happy there. I don't think he's lying when he says he enjoys spending time with beautiful women, doing things together. But it's not clear to me what marriage is going to serve for him.
Yes.
For his family, in the culture, in the context, yes, I get it, but I'm not sure.
I agree. I put him in that sort of ambivalent territory.
Yeah.
He's not, I don't think he's necessarily deep down a sort of solo person, although you could see him gravitating that way.
Yeah.
I just think he's sort of conflicted. He certainly doesn't seem ready for this. He's rejecting lots and lots of matches. And the only person that he gets really excited about is this stunningly beautiful
model actress.
Model
/ actress.
She was she was a pageant winner,
right,
and so on. But who also, to her credit, has depth and is educated and so on. So she's not just a pretty face. Okay, let's talk about that next person, Akshay.
Which one was
He's the
Akshay?
20. He's 23 or 24.
Oh, right.
He is the son. So he's also in India. He is the son of an overbearing, dictating mother.
Yes.
Very wealthy family. He's a total dud. I think I'm almost sure he's on the spectrum. He's autistic along some dimension.
Yeah.
There.
Or he's just, he's become accustomed to his parents making all of his decisions for him. And that's not unusual in our culture. Again, because we are so community based, because we live under the guise of such strong parental and grandparent figures even. I don't know that a lot of us have the opportunity to really develop as individuals. We're not encouraged to seek our own personalities and go find ourselves, right? So it's probably true that it's a little bit of both. It's a little bit on the spectrum, but I think it's also just a little bit of the product of how he was raised. He had somebody making all his decisions for him, cooking his food for him, doing the laundry, telling where he's going to go to school. Like every decision was made for him. So then if that's how you've been moving through life, then of course you're going to take the same approach to your partner. And you could see a little bit of the struggle where I'm not really sure I want to do this. It seems like a big, you could see moments where his true authentic self was struggling to come out, but it was just beaten down mercilessly by the enormity of the cultural pressure.
Yeah. I feel bad for him. I feel bad for him in that he doesn't feel fully formed. No. It's hard. First of all, it's very hard to be fully formed when you're in your early to mid 20s anyways.
And you never lived outside the house.
He works for the family business.
I mean, that's, yes.
He actually is in many ways all the things that makes me sad about young men in the world today. He plays video games. He's not really doesn't seem that curious. No. It seems like he does care about studying, and he seems like he's into the family business. So he has that sort of richness, I think. But it also, as a son of an at times overbearing, controlling mom, it can have these two different effects on you. You can kind of take it and then perhaps, just be resigned to it. Right. You can take it. You can be, resentful of it, or you can rebel against it. Right. And, for me, I took it, was resentful, and then now as an adult, I rebel against it. I rebel against being the control. And I think that that's a theme in my life, is the pursuit of freedom after having to weather that for so long. Yeah.
I think that, he's going through the motions, and there's a lot of people. And that's not wrong either. If you find somebody else who also understands that these are the motions, then those two people can get married and be very happy together, right? If you're on the same page about it. I don't think, I met a lot of people who couldn't tell me when we sat down for a date, through these apps or through the matchmaker. So why are you ready to get married? They didn't really, that's just what you do. Yes. And so there are plenty of people who feel that way. Like, I guess, this is what my grandparents did and my parents did and all my friends are doing it. And my older brother did it. So I guess this is what I gotta do. That is the worst reason to do it. I mean, but but if you can agree, if you find other people who also collectively agree, then it's okay. I guess so. Yeah. I don't know. I think there is something about deciding to do it because it's right for you that makes it easier and better to do it. But this could be a very cultural difference between our opinions. I think in my culture, there's probably a lot of people who don't even recognize that they're in that position. Yes. That's why we're doing this podcast. Yeah. Because, it's a bubble. It's a cultural bubble. And especially if you live there and you haven't been exposed to anything else, and this is how everybody around you is doing it, then you go through it and there's nothing wrong with that. And the person who you even select won't find anything wrong with that either, because she's doing it for the same exact reasons that you're doing it. So I think that, while I feel bad for him, the person who I really feel bad for is the person he chose to be with, because I can't imagine being a woman and entering into that kind of family dynamic where your husband is just going through the motions and you're living in this incredibly controlled environment where everybody's going to tell you down to the when you should have a baby. That to me was really got me coughing. I'm not surprised, but when the mother figure was saying to the older son, this is when you should have a baby, really made me take a step back. Now, to the mom's credit, perhaps credit's not the right word. It's too generous. She knows how controlling she is. Oh, I don't think she has any idea. Oh, but she wanted a daughter-in-law who was flexible. Flexible is code for we'll do what I want. We'll do whatever I tell her. Yeah, I think that she She owns it in some sense, but when they're sitting down with the other family, in that very lavish hotel, and her husband makes a joke that, look, your mother-in-law will be very controlling. I'm very easygoing. She snapped back hard. She did not like that description. But if she really wanted to own it, she would say yes. Like, I have very high expectations. Yeah. And so, at some points to the camera, she does say, I don't go to somebody else's house and tell them how to live. So I don't want you coming into my house and telling me how to live. Mm-hmm. But that statement in and of itself is just so rich because her house, not her son's house.
Yes.
Not her husband's house.
Yes.
Her house. And anybody else, right? That's how daughter-in-law is. Anybody else, coming into my house and telling me how. No, and so, I found her to be I would love to see a show all about her.
I think it'd be exhausting.
It would be exhausting.
This is something that I think is an interesting thing, is that some of the first dates happen with the two families.
Yes.
So the introductions are made. And
yes.
These are incredibly awkward sequences.
So loaded. I've never done that.
Okay.
That is a whole other level of traditional that I was not willing to go down. I mean, I think that would be so hard. I mean, the dynamics are there's too many dynamics to be worried about in that room, let alone the person who you're actually supposed to be getting to know.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a very loaded meeting.
I think a lot of people want to hide their family for as long as possible.
Although maybe, and other people might say it's really good because, as you said, you want to hide your family. But, most of our baggage comes from our family. So I would say that as human beings, that's where we get our first baggage that we're proud of, right? Our little carry-on size baggage. That's where we get it from. So you might as well meet it. You might as well see the dynamic right up front, right? Like no secrets, no surprises. This is who we are. And so maybe in some ways it's better. You just get it all out there.
That's really funny.
Instead of waiting for 6 to 8 months to a year before you meet somebody's family, and then you see for real what those people are like. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, we have 3 more. Well, let's pick up the pace for these 3 just in the interest of time. So the next one is Ankita.
Yes.
So she lives in India. I don't remember where, but she has a clothing.
Yes.
And basically e-commerce.
She's definitely better solo. And she even acknowledges that, I think, towards the end.
Yes.
I just don't think that she's too focused on the fun things that she's doing with her life.
And she's very progressive.
She is,
especially by Indian standards.
Yeah. And I applaud her for that. I think it's great that she came to that realization on her own, at least in the final sort of shots with her talking with her best friend about what she wants to do in life. Good for her.
I think she's the best solo candidate.
Yeah, I think I might agree with you there.
Yeah, she talks about wanting someone who's an equal, and she's such a problem client for Seema that Seema enlists another more quote unquote progressive matchmaker
who didn't turn out to be that progressive.
No, yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. It just shows you how different it is there.
Yeah.
So this, we're going to just spoiler alert. So Ankita sort of comes to the conclusion after trying the matchmaking that she doesn't really need it. So, and she has this very supportive friend.
Yes.
And she's like, your business is your fucking baby.
Yeah, that's right.
And then
good for her.
And then they have this thing like, worst come to worst, we'll move in together and we'll grow old together kind of thing. And then she's saying, what are you talking about? Worst comes to worst.
She's like, that's best.
Best comes to best.
That's
we
the
do
best
that
scenario. And I love that, actually.
Yes.
Because it is true that some of us feel very fulfilled by our best friends and our families, and we don't need anything else. And as long as you recognize that, great. That's fine. I think the earlier you recognize these things about yourself, the better it is for everybody. So you're not struggling to fit through this mold for such a long time and then feeling like you failed. You need to know these things about yourself. So I applaud her for making that decision.
I agree. I'm with you totally on this. So the last 2, let's just talk about them together because I think that they're a very nice example of how fraught this is and this notion of respectability.
Yes.
And then one of the other themes in the show that I identified is this idea that people want, what do you want? I want everything. Right? So I want, this income, this education.
It's like going through Amazon.
Exactly.
You're checking the boxes.
Yes, we want to optimize these things. And the last 2 people, so So one is Yasser.
Yes.
And he's Indian American, lives in the United States.
Yeah.
He's a sort of goofy, good-hearted college counselor. Not really into achievement. Like, he'd be happy being a house husband and doing the cooking and cleaning.
I liked him. He seemed like a quality person.
He's
a genuine quality person.
Exactly. Good heart, kind, mega nerd. And
I love the academia enthusiasts, of course.
Yes, indeed. And but he has a dark secret.
Yes.
And Rupam.
And Rupam.
Rupam, excuse me. Rupam, she's in Denver. She's in the USA also. She's a Sikh.
Yes.
And so I thought she was quite lovely.
She is. Yeah, I thought so too.
Mid-30s, I think.
Yeah.
And but with a very overbearing father.
Yes.
An exhausting
very proud.
father.
Yeah, very proud.
Yes. Bossy, pushy. So they both have big strikes against them.
I mean, strikes in the sense from the traditional matchmakers approach.
Yes,
from
of course.
Seema's approach, they have strikes against them, which I found.
But from a Bumble approach, you can deal with these things.
Like these are just part of who they are. I mean, it's so, and this is the part about the matchmaking, which I find to be just so upsetting, right? That a divorcee is considered such what do we give the woman a poor A to write on her shirt? I mean, come on now. Like this is life, Yes. In fact.
So she's divorced and has a child.
And she has a child.
Yes.
And for, this is considered so taboo, right? And the matchmaker even says off that, well, your choices are going to be a lot less, which may be true. And in reality, I found that my friends who have been divorced are genuinely much more sane about marriage and have been beaten up and have come to acknowledge, the people who learn from their divorce anyway, about their faults and what it really takes to be in a good relationship. So I have even more respect for these people. You would think these are the people we should be chasing after. But yes, not according to the traditional Indian matchmaker. It's seen as a failure.
Well, but then what's interesting is the challenges that she faces. For example, Seema presents a man who the father vetoes.
Yes.
Because he doesn't meet the cultural expectation.
Right. Yeah. It's a communal decision, right?
Yes.
This poor daughter might have actually gone out with the man.
She seemed kind of excited about this guy.
But if your parents feel very strongly about it, again, this is, how much do I fight? Do I just submit? Do I submit and be resentful, or do I rebel?
Yes.
And I think those are three paths that a lot of us find ourselves in. And I know people from all phases in all of those buckets. And she chose to submit.
Yes.
I'm like, okay, if my dad says no, it's not worth
fighting him for this.
I have too much else to deal with in life. I don't need to add this complicating factor. So yeah. Yeah.
And then Yasser has
poor Yasser, his dad.
He has a dad who's in prison or was in prison.
Yeah, for a horrible crime.
Yes,
conspiracy for murder. I mean, come on. That's not, And this is part of this whole, part of the reason why Indian families are so obsessed with every single one of us falling in line is because the choices that you make don't just reflect on you, they reflect on the entire family. Right? So if you choose to rebel, people are going to make judgments about your parents. They're going to make judgments about your siblings. They're going to make judgments about the collective because you chose to be selfish and do that thing that you wanted to do. So poor Yasser, yes, his dad did this horrible thing. Never mind the fact that he doesn't know his dad. He's never had a relationship with this person. He hasn't seen this person in a really long time. But his family, from the South Asian lens, the whole family will be considered in a very negative light because of the acts of this horrible, this horrible human being.
Yes.
So it's very unfair.
I agree. And you're rooting for him.
Totally rooting for him. He seems like a very quality person.
Okay. So I wrote down a few other kind of themes that I saw in the show, but I'm also curious.
Let's hear it.
What you thought. So one was this issue of people wanting everything, but Seema and her team, the life coach, the astrologer, and so on, that she will pull in to help guide these folks is to get people to compromise, to recognize that, okay, you don't have everything.
Yeah.
you can't expect, so that idea.
Yeah. And I think that's something that all of us face now in the Amazon world, which is it's so easy to just click on boxes. I want this, I want this, I want this, I want this. And what are my search results? Even on dating apps, it's like that. You can check on the boxes and everything from how tall you want somebody to be to what sort of cultural and religious background they are, what kind of degrees and education they have. So it does make us very picky. And maybe in previous times when we didn't know all the options that we were able to select from, it's again that concept of how many possible
choice
decisions
overload.
are
Yeah,
there.
that's right.
It's choice overload. So then, we make bad decisions because we're just given too many options. That's certainly a thing.
Yeah, I think that's right. And this harkens back to the secretary problem that we talked about earlier, is you keep looking, and you might pass the person who might have been ideal or even who would be good enough,
Yeah. Yeah. And I think also once you pay somebody to do a job for you, you're going to expect more than what you could have done on your own. So I think that's certainly a part of it too. If you're going to retain a matchmaker, you better do. And these people aren't free, these people make, depending on who they are and who they claim are in their portfolio, these people are charging thousands of dollars to their clients. So then you want what you paid for, right? You want somebody amazing if you're going to pay that much money. The way that we shop around for any of our consumer goods, we're going to want that out of our partner as well.
Yes, indeed. Well said. We talked about this idea of respectability. So this is a family choice. The other one that I noticed is what you're seeing in this show is the sort of modern age, this sort of progressive, more egalitarian, more individualism kind of creeping in.
Sure.
Culturally.
Sure.
So obviously Ankita is the best example of that. She's ambitious. She has her own business.
Yeah.
And she's looking for an equal, and if she, it doesn't work, that's fine. I'm going to be okay. In episode 7, Seema says that the marriages in India are so delicate, they're breaking like biscuits.
Yeah, I think I was happy to hear that. I remember hearing somebody say once that a high divorce rate is a sign of an equal society, because usually women don't feel trapped. Usually a lot of people stay in marriages because they don't have the financial resources, they don't have the emotional support, they have no place to go. But if you have those things, you have access to those things. If women have education, if they have jobs, they have money, then they're not afraid to walk out. They don't need to put up with bad treatment because they have other options, and good for them. So maybe that's part of what's happening in India, is because girls are going to school where they didn't before. I think that
when you don't need a man to support you,
right,
then you don't need a man unless you want a man.
Exactly.
For example.
Exactly.
Yes.
So I was happy to hear that, because for a long time, in previous generations, you heard these horrible tales of just the worst treatment in these arranged marriages, but the women stayed because they had no place else to go. And so I was pleased to hear her say that. I think there's two other things that are interesting. One, maybe arranged marriages, people realize, it's not really the best. Their parents went through their own arranged marriages, and maybe they had some shortcomings, or they would have done things differently. So maybe they are giving their kids some grace. That's nice to see as well. And then the other is just Western influence. A lot of kids from India are going to school abroad. They're meeting other people. They're seeing how other cultures do things and realizing, maybe I could do a love marriage instead. And social media and the internet is bringing, our culture is becoming more universally, becoming a little bit more homogenized. Maybe you pick up a little bit of the old, you pick up a little bit of the new, and maybe that's the best path forward. I kind of like that. I see it. When I was dating, I was sort of looking at a Venn diagram, these are all the things my parents want. Here are the things that I want. And I was kind of searching for that sweet spot in the middle, which I think if you ask any one of these folks is maybe where they are too.
Yeah, that's well said. I agree. It's sort of a fascinating anthropological
absolutely.
Case study. And I think that's, whether you care about the topic or not, it's to me, that was one of the more interesting parts of this process. So I think we should probably wrap up here. I want to, repeat one of the ones that got me thinking about this and why it became a worthy topic here, is the idea of that this seems to be the one path. That this is not, well, there are two paths that you could have. Let's explore this one. Let's explore that one. And, the one being the partnered path and the other one being the solo path. And I just think as I like to say, is that marriage is overprescribed, whether it be arranged or love.
Sure.
And we have a lot of data to suggest why it's overprescribed, as you just talked about, is because if you give people access to divorce,
a lot of people will take it, and also fear, lack of consequence. I think that as a society, we're getting better about not treating divorced people so badly.
Thank you.
There was so much judgment, and that kind of broke my heart with that one particular person on the show, is that a lot of, I think, Asian culture frowns on that. And as a society, if we let go of that, a lot of people would be happier, to just acknowledge, I've made a mistake. This is not the right person. Let's just both get out and be happier with our lives. But they fear the judgment from their
Yeah, it's too bad. I mean, you can imagine an alternative situation where you should be afraid of being judged poorly because you put your child in danger, because you're living with someone who's abusive or who's an alcoholic.
Exactly. We should be commending people who get out of those toxic relationships. But there's so much judgment.
So with this, I'm going to say, Rupali, thank you for being my first choice.
Yes.
And clearly the best choice.
If you had an option of 10, you may have selected differently, but I was glad to be from your pool of 1 or maybe 2.
That's great. Okay, good. Cheers. All right, welcome back. That was a super fun conversation with Rupali. She's still here with me. And for our bonus material, we're going to talk about colorism and heightism. So this colorism is one of the reasons why people hate watch Indian matchmaking. What is colorism?
Colorism. And I will say, I'll start off by saying this. This is applicable across all, I would say, Middle Eastern, South Asian, East Asian culture, and also Black culture.
Okay.
I think that I've talked about this issue with my friends from all nationalities and all kinds of backgrounds, and it is assessing positive attributes and defining beauty with lighter colored skin. And so
it's not the color of skin, it's the shade of color. Yes.
And the darker your skin, the less desirable, the less beautiful you are. And this is true, in Korea and Japan and China and India. It's true in Africa. It's true in the Middle East. Physical traits, lighter colored hair, eyes, skin, that's considered very prized. And it very much impacts your dating in the matchmaking world, your desirability.
So this comes up in the checklist, the criteria.
Absolutely, yeah. Yes. I mean, if you look at Indian dating sites, they definitely ask you for your skin tone.
Really?
That's a feature, along with age and education and religion. Skin tone is there.
Mine is pink.
You're considered very desirable in the Indian dating world. It's I was talking to some of my South Asian friends to try to understand, where is this coming from? Is this a result of colonialism? Is this British colonial impact, influence? Is this something we have done to ourselves? We have a caste system in India. We are not foreign to the concept of putting people in categories and in social hierarchies, for sure. Is this part of just generation is evolution, where if you worked out in it's maybe associated with wealth, for example, that if you worked outside, if you were a laborer, then you were darker.
An indication of status
and wealth, you know, and if you were inside, then you were lighter skinned. And so maybe it's connected to other attributes that people would consider desirable. But it's harsh. Yeah. It is mean. I gotta tell you, it is not fair.
I know there's been a lot of research on this. I don't have the expertise to speak to it. My suspicion is it's a bunch of these things that gets baked into the culture. And so, in the same way that there are certain preferences for example, there have been changes in preferences in body type that happened. You know, so back in the day, being being
heavier.
plump was good because it showed you had access
your
to
money. Yeah, you had food, you had money.
And then, and
now
it's the opposite.
We're all drinking detox teas to make ourselves thinner.
And going to, Barry's boot camp. So but even something in LA, which is like fascinating, is like suddenly big butts are like,
it's true.
Big butts are such a thing that people are getting butt implants. So these things do change, but they get baked into the culture
being
generally.
tanned in certain, for people who are white, being tanned is considered healthy. It means you're out in the sun, you're getting good exposure.
It means you have leisure time.
Yeah, that was a really odd thing. People in Asia do not understand this concept of tanning. That is not what we do. We have lightening creams. That is the biggest money-making beauty product for Asian culture.
So this is why some people don't like this. I think especially folks who may lean far left, because it's really distasteful, right? It's discriminatory.
It's discriminatory.
And I think that the alternative narrative, so it's like, you're angry with Netflix because you're displaying colorism. Mm-hmm. I don't have the same view. I actually think that it is responsible to show it, because it spurs the kind of conversation we're having right here, which is that a legitimate criterion that you should use to judge a potential partner?
Yeah, it's certainly not very woke, for sure.
Yes.
But part of what I do appreciate about the Indian matchmaking is it's very blunt and it's very honest, right? And you can see Seema saying that. She's not very attractive, but she has,
she has a good heart.
But she has a good heart.
Yes.
She's very blunt about it. And she doesn't bother trying to set up two people who are on opposite, she doesn't try to set up Pradhiman with an unattractive person, because she knows, right? That's not going to work. That's not what he's into.
And people do this naturally anyways.
Yeah.
They self-select into,
absolutely,
to the same, not exact level, but band of attractiveness.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so skin color is a big deal, and they're honest about it. They don't try to hide it. Mm-hmm. They don't try to make it, it's just a fact. It's a fact along with any other fact that, if a girl or a guy is skinny or the height.
Yeah. What do they say? Slim and trim.
Slim and trim.
Slim and trim. He's slim and trim.
That means he's in good shape. He's fit, I think, I do appreciate that people are just blunt about it. Oh, nope, you're too dark. You're too dark. And all the implications of that, we could go into that. That's a whole other debate. But they want what they want, and they're not apologetic about it.
Yeah. I agree. It's good that people are being honest, because they're not wasting people's time and so on.
And you can't extract that from South Asian dating, by the way. There's no way they could have put a filter on that on the show.
That's fair.
So much a part of it.
Yeah, and I think it's wrong to have tried to do that, because again, it's shining a light on this world, and it would not be an accurate portrayal if you had it out there. Now, I'm not going to disagree. It may be distasteful for people, but you can't be guaranteed to always get information that you're going to like.
I can think of a lot of distasteful things on TV right
Indeed. Yes, that's right. Here's what I'll lament with regard to the colorism is that if someone was able to move past it because they're woke, because they recognize that the shade of skin doesn't really make much difference for what kind of partner someone's going to be, is that it can open up opportunities.
Of course.
And I'll use my own personal example because it's only fair, is that as a younger man, I had much more of a checklist. And so for example, it never was race-based, but for example, like I always thought that I really wanted athletic women. And when I let go of that and I started dating women who were sort of less athletic, I found that they were often really sexy and they were really fun, and then like lifestyle wise, we could still match up.
Sure.
And so on. And so, I wanted them active, but they didn't need to be the jock, the female jock.
Your Amazon checklist changed.
Exactly.
It changed.
And when I let that go,
it got that filter.
It improved my dating life. It didn't worsen my dating life. And so it'd be nice to see this move to a place where that's less the case.
Yeah, it's so ingrained. I don't know. I couldn't give you.
It's slow. It'll be slow.
It would be slow.
Well, the other one that no one's talking about, that's even more insidious, I think, is the heightism that exists in the show.
Yeah.
So no one's pushing back on the heightism.
No.
Even the people who hate the colorism probably are heightists. And so this is something that shows up a lot. I want tall. I want tall.
Yes.
I want tall.
Yeah.
Even if the person is not even that tall themselves.
Yeah, I know. Isn't that ridiculous?
Yes.
It is. I think this is just a universal thing, right? Height is correlated with success and power. And, even if we don't have it ourselves, we want to marry somebody who's taller so that we could perhaps have children who are tall, like height is a big deal. And, what's comical. I mean, Asian culture, I think the average height is just shorter.
Sure.
I don't know what the average height is. I won't speculate on that, but,
there are cultural differences in height, certainly.
Yeah.
Yes.
As a man, it's very important that you be tall. I think it's less important for the girl, but
it still matters, though.
It still matters.
But not to the same degree.
You want to try to match them up, visually. You want the visual to look good. And it's just, I have to laugh at it only because while I understand it, again, when you look at long-term marriages and what makes them click, and this is part of the show that my favorite part of the show, to be honest, is when they interviewed the couples who had been married for a long time.
Yes.
And they said, how did you meet? What makes your marriage work? I want to see more of that in a future show because those people, their dynamics were so interesting. What made them work? Not one of them said, oh, well, what's really made our marriage work is that she's so light-skinned and tall.
No one says that.
Nobody says that.
Yes, that's right. So for the listener who hasn't seen this yet, they open the show in this. So have you ever seen When Harry Met Sally? They have these couples on a couch who have been together for 30 or 40 years talking about how they met and so on.
Right.
They do a similar thing with Indian matchmaking where they have these Indian couples talking about their arranged marriage and what they thought of the person when they first met and so on.
Right.
And they're sort of heartwarming and they're funny and they're interesting.
They're all great.
Yes. And I think that, it does a nice job of contrasting. And I'm sure the producer, director wanted that contrast to show that, these people are thinking about the wrong things some of the time.
Yeah. And I also think that maybe it was put in there because at least in the West, we look at arranged marriages and people are really taken aback.
Yes,
how could you be married to a perfect stranger? I mean, that's criminal. I mean, people view it as being almost evil and bad. And I think that, certainly in my culture, I know people who have been arranged and they've been married, happily, genuinely happily for decades and decades. And, on these little bits, you can clearly see some of these couples are so happy with each other.
Indeed.
They've been married for a long time and they couldn't have imagined it any other way. So I appreciated that she showed that, because I don't think that gets talked about enough.
I think that's great. I have my opinion about this is you love marriage people, glass houses and stones. It's not clear that you're doing it really well. So I think we should be very careful about being critical of other paths to doing this.
Yes, this is true. This is true.
So this issue of heightism, I think is fascinating. I mean, admittedly, I'm a very tall man.
Yes. So
and I have benefited greatly from being a tall man.
Being tall, yeah.
But I notice it and I think it's unfair.
Yeah.
And, women complain about men lying about their height on the apps.
Yes.
A guy who's 6 foot on the apps is really 5'10".
Yep.
A guy who's 5'9" is really 5'7".
Yep.
And so on. Mm-hmm. And I think that's unfortunate. I was kind of looking around for heightism. Mm-hmm. It hasn't been well researched. It's not a big topic. Mm. I think that it's actually a legitimate gripe to have. Mm-hmm. It's pervasive. Mm-hmm. It's cross-cultural, as you pointed out, in the same way that colorism is. Mm-hmm. And it is rooted a little bit in some natural biological kinds of things.
Yes.
Perhaps good nutrition,
mm-hmm.
right? So
it's associated with health and wellness,
so on.
Good gene pool, who knows?
And then also, as you said, it's people care about it more for men, in part because men get judged less on their looks and more on status and mm-hmm. resources and dominance and power. Mm-hmm. And it is associated naturally. So babies and little kids, associate tall people with more power mm-hmm. and so on. Mm-hmm. I went down the Reddit rabbit hole for a little bit on this. So there are actually 2 forums on Reddit that I found. One is a subreddit called Short and another subreddit called Tall.
Okay.
So I want you to guess which one has more subscribers.
Short.
No.
What?
Tall.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
Almost twice as much. So
people participating in the conversation.
That's exactly right.
So is this a forum where tall people just gripe about all the things that suck about being tall?
Well, so no. So the short one has 59,452 subscribers.
Okay.
Or Redditors, however you say it. It's described as a place for people of small stature to discuss the pros, cons, highs, and lows of being shorter than average.
Pun intended.
I think so. And then it says, what is short?
Yes.
For the purpose of this subreddit, 5'7" and less is considered short for men.
Okay.
5'3" and below is short for women.
Okay.
However, everyone is welcome. We don't care as long as you're polite, respectful, and a positive member of the community.
Okay.
The tall.
Uh-huh.
Much less description. So they're 113,305. No height requirement! Exclamation point. We welcome people of all shapes and sizes to discuss all things tall related.
I'm so curious as to who is on the tall Reddit then. I mean, if you don't put rules down, then I suppose anybody thinks
It's
they're
a good
tall.
question. Well, you can check it out. I'll put them in the exhibits. But I do think that, I just think it's a fascinating thing. Again, it's a lot of things that happen when it comes to stereotyping, prejudice, discrimination.
Sure.
Is some of them, we see the conflict, we see the challenge, right? So judging someone based upon the color of their skin at one point was fine. Nowadays, not fine.
Not so much.
Judging people by the shade of their skin, still largely fine, right? Judging people by their height, absolutely fine and, and accepted and so on.
Interesting.
And yet that seems, that ends up being, kind of unfair. I have a podcast that's going to be forthcoming where we talk about singleism, about judging people based upon their relationship status.
Yeah.
And the judgment and discrimination that gets not only baked into the society, but gets baked into the tax code, gets baked into legislation.
For sure. Everything we do encourages the family unit.
Yes.
Encourages the family unit, for sure.
And, these isms, no, heightism is not as bad as sexism or racism or heterosexism.
Right.
But the argument that we conclude, I'm just going to preview this, is that if you're going to fight one form of oppression, you should be fighting all forms of oppression because they all start from the same basis.
Yeah, I can see that. Although, we did.
We want to knock out sexism and racism first, obviously.
Bigger fish to fry.
Yes,
I would say.
that's right. But it still doesn't make it okay.
Right.
And at least in my opinion. And I think that this should be a highly credible opinion because I benefit from heightism.
Sure.
And I recognize how I benefit from heightism. Yeah. And I will say that I have been guilty of it. I had an exchange at one point with a woman on a dating app, a woman who I ended up dating, and I made a quip about me being tall. Mm-hmm. And she's not a heightist. Mm-hmm. And she kind of clapped back at me and said, I hate that women she said, I hate that women judge men based upon their height. Mm-hmm. It is like a man judging a woman based upon her bra size.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
And I would just remember going, uh-oh.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We ended up actually going out and dating. And so that was quite nice. And it was sort of nice to know.
But it's not because you were tall.
It actually was despite that I was tall. Like she didn't like tall men. And so it kind of helped. I was like, oh, she must really like me for who I am, not for this thing that doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
So, well, Rupali, this was super fun. Thank you for sticking around for the bonus material.
My pleasure.
Well, thanks so much.
Yes, you're very welcome.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening to Solo, the single person's guide to a remarkable life. For more about our guests and show notes, go to petermcgraw.com. Please subscribe and share with your single friends.